Coming up, MU unrest ripples across the region. Kansas and Missouri respond to the Paris attacks with a backlash against refugees. Upping the age to smoke approved. Plus, 3 years after the Livestrong name came down at Sporting Park, a new name. Are you ready to go to Children's Mercy Park? Hello everyone, I'm Nick Haynes. Good to be with you again. Last week we were committed to a health special with Kathleen Sebelius. So this week, 2 weeks in review, all for the price of one. And working extra hard to dissect twice as much news, the senior reporter for the Call newspaper, Eric Wesson. From The Pitch, reporter Steve Vokrot. Nationally syndicated columnist for the Kansas City Star, Mary Sanchez. And Star reporter, columnist and blogger, Dave Helling. Before terrorists murdered 130 people in Paris, the biggest news story here and across America was strife on a university campus in Missouri. Protesters at the University of Missouri forcing the resignation of the system president and its chancellor.
I'm resigning as president of the University of Missouri system.
There is clearly a problem at the University of Missouri, and I think it is entirely appropriate for students in a thoughtful, peaceful way to protest.
This is not, I repeat, not the way change should come about.
It should not have taken this much, and it is disgusting and vile that we find ourselves in the place that we do.
Now that the news focus has shifted to Paris, is the story over? If you or I were to head on the Columbia campus this very day, would students all be back in their classes? And other than 2 interim leaders now put in place, would things look the same as they did before, Mary Sanchez?
I think it depends on who you are. It would look normal, quote, to someone who just walked on campus and that they took down the tents. All of this is somewhat over. But the issues that the students are concerned about are real issues, and that has not changed at all. Certainly 2 heads rolling doesn't change, and I think that was part of my problem with all of this. That doesn't get to the heart of what really perhaps needs to be addressed there on campuses, and they're long-term issues.
I have to say to you, there's very rarely do we have so many questions that come from our viewers with so many unanswered questions. Sure. That I'd like to pour through just a few of those. The story again prompted the slew of questions. Let's answer some of those. KU grad Leah Robinson tells us a hunger strike apparently was not taken seriously, but when the winningest coach in Mizzou history stands behind his team in not taking the field, why only then is action taken, Eric Wesson?
$1 million, millions of dollars. And I believe that you get into the real mentality through there, because people forget where MU came from in that area and the little Dixie mentality that's there. And you've got 7% of the student population African American. African Americans have been complaining for years about scholarship and grant money and money to go to college is not the same as their white counterparts. And I think that whatever happened in that parade where the car brushed one of the protesters aside, I think that was the bomb that ignited everything, and they did it in an organized manner. What they do after that and how they do it might be another news story, but for this story right here, it looks like that the money that they would be losing from the football game sparked.
Was that the tipping point, Dave Helling?
Well, I think clearly the decision of the African-American football players to sort of issue a statement of solidarity with the hunger striker, and then the football coach's statement in essence backing his players, certainly focused the attention of the state and to some degree the nation on what was going on, and may have hastened the departure of the 2 leaders at the university, although you get the sense that and this is just my sense, that the political leaders around the campus understood that the problem was pretty significant and deep, and otherwise he wouldn't have quit so quickly, or the 2 of them would not have left so quickly. So, I think we're all going to try and figure out, was it the team, was it the hunger strike, was it the media attention? It was clearly a combination of all of that. For our purposes, Nick, the most important thing to keep our eye on is that it is not limited to Missouri now. It is spreading to other campuses, particularly on issues of racial grievance. And in that sense, it may have staying power far beyond whatever happened down in Columbia.
Well, and the thing is, too, you also had, what is it, 9 deans that were writing letters, to get rid of Wolf as well. This had to do with a lot of other issues. And
Other than race.
Absolutely. Yes. That had nothing to do with race. And that, on the students' concern, needs to be that their stuff is just going to get paved over. And really, it was other churning that was occurring in the administrative levels. There's issues with the legislature of how Lofton, the chancellor, was working with, or not working with them, not doing what they wanted. It just has so many other issues that are all tucked in here and entangled, and to think that it was really just, the football players, or one guy doesn't want to eat for a little while, that's really what did this, and that's really the heart of it, that's naive.
Okay, well, Catherine Mooney is a recent MU grad. She wants to know the concrete ways our area universities plan on changing what she calls the racist culture on campuses. Will there be specific curriculum changes, she asks. Steve?
I don't know about curriculum. I think it has to do with just the pervasive environment that exists on these universities. And do black students feel welcome? Do black faculty feel like they want to be retained by higher ups in the administration? And that is a slow systemic change. I mean, like Mary is alluding to, these are not over the night changes. Because 2 people are gone at Mizzou, it takes a long time for that ship to turn around.
Well, here's another one. I am a biracial MU grad, writes Matt Schacht, but I don't understand how Tim Wolf's resignation will improve the black experience on campus when the administration is already moving towards greater diversity education, swift punishment for prejudice-based incidents, and increased representation on campus. What is accomplished by having a sudden change of leadership, Eric?
Well, maybe you change the culture, or you begin to change the culture. You don't do that with one person. And as I said earlier, there's a mentality throughout the area that you would have to change. So maybe this is a step. The jury's out. We'll know this time next year if there's been any impact.
I think anytime you're talking about culture, racial issues, acceptance, it's really needs to be dealt with at a much deeper level than just what's on the surface. So do you have a African American Culture Center, something like that, or do you do a little diversity training here and there? Look at the retention rates of the students. And that was one issue that the outgoing director of the Multicultural Affairs Office at KU, who left, well, I don't think he resigned, but he left, that was one of the things that he pointed out that needed to occur at KU. When you deal with how students are managed and helped throughout their entire experience, that gets to culture. That gets to what higher education is really all about, getting them graduated, having them educated and ready to go on with their lives. That's what needs to be addressed.
Dave.
We should also keep our eyes, Nick, on the potential backlash to what's going on in Missouri and in other campuses. And I've written a story for the newspaper that may run this weekend that talks about campus unrest as a political issue. I covered a Republican campaign forum last Saturday up in Platte County, and Peter Kinder particularly was aggressive about radical tenured professors, and right out of the Ronald Reagan playbook of the 60s, sharply critical of the students and the faculty and the administration up there, and he got roaring applause for that criticism, and the other candidates took part in it as well. So there is a real chance that disruption on campuses could become a political issue, not just in the governor's race or the Senate race, but really other races, perhaps even the presidential race. And that will further cloud the progress, or at least make it more difficult to see precisely what's going on in campus.
The comments, by the way, you saw from viewers came from our Public Insight Network, where we seek out the opinions of area citizens. If you'd like to be part of that, head to kcpt.org/insight. Some observations made about the MU protest got me asking my own questions. MU, one of the widest universities in America? Well, there are dozens of schools that have larger white student bodies, but how does it stack up with other area schools? Missouri State University in Springfield topping that list for the widest public university now by state, with Northwest Missouri State in Maryville just behind. The lowest percentage of white students can be found at UMKC. Does that help explain why we're not seeing anger spilling out there, Eric?
To a degree it does, but the overall picture is that you had, with this situation, was it brought light to the matter. One of the things that I applaud about it was that the students that started it were all graduate students. They handled themselves in an organized manner. And one of the things that I found most compelling in listening to them talk on Kraski's show the other day was they didn't want the messaging to change, so they didn't talk to the media. And when you get into messaging, you get into Black Lives Matter, then you have somebody say, well, all lives matter, and that dilutes the message. So I'm glad that they got their point across and brought these issues to light.
Protesters at MU complaining there are very few black faculty on the Columbia campus, just over 3%. They want a commitment to 10% of the teaching staff. Does any university hit that mark? Take a look at this chart, which shows the highest percentage of black faculty in the country at 3 southern universities: Ole Miss, North Carolina, Alabama, with 6% or more. KU, by way of comparison, half the national average with 3% of black faculty. The national education news site Inside Higher Ed has a story this week asking, could Kansas become the next Mizzou? They've had their own hunger striker, and an overflow crowd of more than 1,000 recently gathered on the KU campus for a forum on race. There are calls for the ouster of white student leaders on the Lawrence campus. According to Insider Higher Ed, black students make up just 4% of KU's student body, and their 4-year graduation rate a third of the rate for white students, and black professors even more scarce at KU than at MU. So what about the question, Mary, the National Education article raises? Could Kansas become the next Mizzou?
I think you're going to see some of the same sort of churnings, the same sort of conversations. What I would hope is that Kansas and University of Missouri could maybe lead a little bit more in these conversations and take it to that higher level. Because when you're talking about who are the professors, that's looking at what the students are kind of alluding to, sometimes rather inarticulately, but the problem of who is a professor and how do we choose professors? It's, again, this whole issue of what is higher education going to look like going forward. And right now, it is very hard to get these tenure track. I mean, you have to have your doctorate, how people kind of come up and through these systems. And that was actually part of the whole MU conversation that started with issues with the graduate students that had nothing to do with race. It had to do with their tuition waivers, their housing, all sorts of issues. And that, they didn't feel like they were being heard, so they kind of rolled and morphed into this other conversation. But end of the line, it is all about what is higher education going to mean in America? Who gets access? Who gets through? Who are the teachers? And that is very much needs to look like the changing demographics of America. Higher ed today doesn't look like America.
But any pressure on KU? We had the hunger strike there, that's over. They've had the race forum. We've had promises of more diversity education on the campus of KU. Has the pressure on KU now removed itself or alleviated itself, Dave?
Well, you get the sense that the pressure is less than it was, but has not gone away. The discussions continue. There are discussions, as you know, involving the Student Senate and other student leaders. And again, let's make the point, Nick, it isn't limited to just Lawrence or Columbia. Campuses across the country are examining these questions largely because they are very difficult, very complicated to solve, and involve more than just how many faculty members are African American or even how many students are African American. It's involved with K through 12 education, financial support. I mean, it's all of a piece. And so in that sense, the pressure will never go away. There are, racial problems in this country cannot be solved by one protest at Columbia, one decision in Lawrence. It is much more complicated and difficult than that.
And you won't solve it by putting an African American as the interim chancellor either. That's a Band-Aid on an infection.
Rarely do we discuss international news on this program, but sometimes events overseas can become a local story. Consider the terrorist attacks in Paris. As people around the world joined in solidarity with the victims and their families in France, Kansas City lit up some of its most familiar landmarks in the colors of the French flag. Now some of our region's top elected leaders are using those events to block Syrian refugees from heading to our bi-state area. They are responding to heightened concerns terrorists might use the refugees as cover to sneak into the country. Kansas Governor Sam Brownback signs an executive order directing that no state agency or organization receiving state money assist in any way the relocation of Syrian refugees to Kansas.
The terrorist groups themselves have said they're going to penetrate these refugee groups, individuals coming in, to try to radicalize them.
In Missouri, there are calls for a special session of the legislature to tackle the issue. More than 120 lawmakers signed a letter to Governor Nixon calling on him to block Syrian refugees from heading to the Show Me State.
I have an obligation to represent the interest of my people to start with. Security should be a priority.
Our local congressional delegation is also talking tough. Kansas Congressman Kevin Yoder took to the floor of the House this week, calling on the president to halt the flow of Syrian refugees into America.
French officials have indicated that at least one of the Paris attackers linked to ISIS was admitted into Europe as a refugee from Syria. Nevertheless, the administration has made it clear that in spite of this, it will continue to seek to bring up to 10,000 Syrian refugees to America in the coming year.
Steve Volkert, do governors, though, have the legal authority to stop accepting Syrian refugees?
No, I think Sam Brownback's order is even to say that state agencies can't assist in the relocation may push up on some constitutional issues. I think some people will have to sort that out later on. There's a bit of irony. Well, there's a lot of different kinds of irony in this whole situation. One of the reasons that Syria is in the state that it is today is because of pro-democracy protesters brushing up against and clashing, frankly, against the regime in Syria. The United States policy has been to try to establish democracy in Middle Eastern countries. And now when refugees are trying to leave dangerous situations, I mean, Syria is one of the most dangerous countries on the planet right now. Now we're sending them a message that we don't want them here. And on the flip side, I mean, there is some nuance to this too, because, you know, the United States government probably feels that it's somewhat incumbent to at least take a look at who's coming in. Because if you recall, pre-9/11, there was intelligence that had its eyes on, you know, some of the perpetrators of the attack in the country, and they were heavily criticized afterwards for not taking more action.
Polls, though, show that our elected leaders that we just saw are actually in step with the public. Majority of Americans saying, yes, they do want to see curbs on Syrian refugees coming into this country.
Well, and that is why we need elected officials who actually know what they're talking about. And too many times on this issue, they just flat out don't. There's nothing wrong with asking questions about how do we vet refugees. We should be doing that. We are doing that. We've been doing that for years now, particularly with the Syrians. There are actually whole new steps put in place to check there are counterterrorism channels, to check Iraqi and Syrian refugees at a higher level because of some of these fears. But this is being just thrown out of proportion. I mean, the refugees are some of the most checked people. That's not how you're going to slip a terrorist into the United States. There are other ways, and what they're going into, what Brownback, there are two major Supreme Court cases that say this is unconstitutional. You can't limit who is legally in the country, who goes in, and those people, you can't limit their movement within states. And if these states think that they're going to just cut off funding to help Syrian refugees, on what basis? Their nationality, their religion, and you're going to go ahead and keep helping other refugees? That's a Supreme Court case waiting to happen, too.
We should keep in mind that Kansas City actually has a fairly healthy refugee community and support services. Somalia, for example, Somali refugees. And there is some interest in Sam Brownback's position because almost alone among Republicans, he's actually had a fairly liberal stance on refugees in the past. He supported more refugees, admitting more refugees from North Korea, from Darfur. You know, he's spoken out eloquently. He was on National Public Radio or PBS, one or the other, with Barack Obama as a senator talking about more refugees from Africa. So his stance on this may reflect his desire to turn everyone's attention away from other problems in the state of Kansas and to sort of catch the zeitgeist concerning concerns about what happened in Paris.
Next up, silencing unpopular positions. It's happening on both sides of state line. The Speaker of the Kansas House has been making headlines for removing 3 Republicans from a key health committee because they support Medicaid expansion. A day later, 2 GOP lawmakers with concerns about school funding are ousted from the House Education Committee. Meanwhile, in Kansas City, Mayor Sly James asks for the resignation of a TIF commissioner he appointed. Why? Because he voted no to giving public subsidies for a Crossroads redevelopment project. While Republican leaders in Topeka have been blasted for their moves, is there any difference between their actions and this week's move by Kansas City Mayor Sly James, Steve?
No, not really. It's the same parliamentary procedure, if you will, to remove people who are taking positions contrary to what higher-ups would like to see happen.
But, you know, don't you want, if you are a leader, have people around you who agree with what you're doing to be able to move things forward? So should we be surprised by any of these moves or concerned about them, Eric?
We should be concerned because there's always a need to hear another side or another view. If you had a lot of yes people, then you might be getting ready to run into a brick wall and you don't have anybody there to challenge or help you vet this process to see whether it's a viable process or not.
Dave?
Yeah, you know, the mayor of Kansas City is a relatively powerless person. He has the power of the pulpit, of course, and has a veto power, which is used very rarely, but he or she has the power of appointment. And that's really one of the most important tools that any executive has, or for that matter, Speaker of the House. And so that's how they exercise their authority, to remove people they don't think are voting the way they want them to. Tim Huelskamp was kicked off the Ag Committee in the U.S. House because he made the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, mad. It happens more often than you know. It's really the only way an executive, not the only way, but one of the most important ways an executive in our political system can exercise power, and that's what's happened in this case.
Well, speaking of Sly James, next on Week in Review, From Friendly to Friction, a new pitch story examines how Kansas City Mayor Sly James is finding it harder to win friends and influence people in his second term. Even some new council members who are in league with the mayor expressing frustrations about working with him. Steve Urquhart, what's the biggest beef?
I don't know that there's one that's bigger than others because there are several of them. Among them, I would say that there's some frustration about information sharing going on at City Hall. Some council members feel like they can't get information. They feel like they're spread too thin with several committee assignments. Probably a lot of the frustrations point to a mayor who in his first 4 years had a very friendly city council, voted with them almost all the time, and he is finding himself dealing with a group of people who, by all accounts, are free-thinking, acting independently, and very attuned to their constituents, and he's finding that a lot of his policy positions and things that he wants to advance are not necessarily popular with the city council.
Okay, Eric.
This is what happens when you put a bunch of lawyers together. I believe one of his biggest points is to be able to sell people his ideas, his thoughts on things. I think the biggest thing that causing the friction is the tips and the hotel, and having his vision and how he wants to do things versus how the general public wants things done. And I think that those two is what is creating the conflict. It's my way or the highway, and sometimes he sounds like a big kid having a temper
The traditional
tantrum.
pattern in Kansas City is for mayors to have rocky first terms and then do better in the second term. And this is actually flipping it a little bit, and it'll be interesting to see if this trend continues.
This week, by the way, the mayor responding to alarm over an upturn in homicides by announcing a new anti-violence task force. Is there a need for another task force, Mary?
Not in terms of how you're going to solve it. There is only in that it's good to bring in, kind of to your point, more voices, and some of the people that are on that aren't people who have been active in this level before. So that's all good. Is it going to solve it? No.
And it's going to take a year for their final report, Eric, to become made available to the public.
Yes, that was the projection that he shared on Wednesday. But let me say this. We've got these reports, did one in 2006, did another one in 2011. They gave it to him in 2013. Now, at the same time, a few months ago, he started Violence-Free KC out of the Health Commission. You've got a trend here of young people here using PCP. They're killing people. They have no thought. You cannot commission that. You cannot task force that. So why not take some of the things that you already have in other books and make them appropriate for today?
Steve.
Right, like Eric says, this has been a continuation of ideas to put task forces together, and the efficacy of them can be debated. The one thing that gives me some pretty good hope about this latest task force maybe being more effective than previous ones is that Julie Justice is going to be the chairwoman of it. And when she was in the Missouri Senate, she undertook a huge effort to overhaul the state criminal code. So I think she's pretty in tune to these matters.
Okay, a couple of other headlines I want to mention on this week's program. Almost 3 years after taking down the Livestrong Sporting Park sign, Sporting Kansas City ready to rename its soccer stadium again. Are you ready for Children's Mercy Park, What does Sporting get out of this? What does Children's Mercy get out of this deal, Dave?
Well, they get what all stadium sponsors get, which is some publicity. There were some eyebrows raised about a hospital, in essence, spending money.
Yeah, well, this is a non-profit.
Some sort of relationship instead of on care of children, but I don't get a sense that there's an overwhelming concern about
You don't see that in renaming, though, when you look at the big stadiums for professional sports across the country, Mary. It is all these huge corporations that do that, not a non-profit hospital.
Generally it is, and that's what I think it will be interesting to see how they take this forward.
And when they asked us for a health levy tax increase, and they have Children's Mercy.
Yeah, but we don't know how much money is involved. Maybe I mean it may not be a great deal of money being exchanged.
Right. The financial terms have not been announced, but you may want to remember that when on the Livestrong deal, it wasn't so much money coming from Livestrong to Sporting Kansas City as Livestrong as a charity getting a cut of stadium revenues. Yeah. I don't know if this is the same situation.
Smoke them if you got them, 18 to 20-year-olds. You won't be able to buy cigarettes in Kansas City, Missouri or in Wyandotte County any longer. Elected leaders from both communities voting this week to raise the legal age to buy tobacco and electronic cigarettes from 18 to 21. The idea was announced just 4 weeks ago at a press conference. Now it's law. So when most political decisions sometimes seem to take years of arduous debate, why did this happen so rapidly?
Well, I think it's a fairly safe political decision. I think smoking is on its way down, even among younger people. I don't really know very many people who smoke anymore. So I think it's sort of a no-brainer, really, as a public policy and a public health decision. It ran against a little bit of opposition, but not much.
Eric.
What's going to happen to the revenue that stores and businesses are going to lose in Kansas City now as a result of people going to Raytown and Independence to buy their cigarettes?
And that will be next week's show. That is our week in review, 2 weeks in review. Our thanks to our news reviewers from The Star, Mary Sanchez, and on call at The Call, Eric Weston. Pitching in from the pitch, Steve Volkrat, and he hits your driveway every morning in the pages of your Star, Dave Helling. I'm Nick Haynes from all of us at KCPT. Thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.